Jensen.
It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2024, April 7th through 10th in San Antonio, Texas. Illuminate, innovate, inspire, explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. Register now at elive.ellucian.com. This conference is going to be epic. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. And today is a humbling day, I would say, for all of us. And it's not often, well, it's actually pretty often, but in this world of artificial intelligence and advancements in technology, we still are humbled by technology every single day. When we don't plug something in, which I did recently. I have a coffee warmer that I couldn't figure out this morning why it could not work. And it's not working and my coffee's getting cold. And I realized I had kicked out the plug, but only after 20 minutes of trying to figure out and doing internet searches of why the coffee warmer might not work. So I'm not the only one, though, that has tech problems. Lots of us do. It just reminds you that we're all human. We all got to figure things out as we go along. And somebody that I know that figures things out, and I found out something about him today, is he is a former triathlete. I don't know if he was any good or not, but he was a former triathlete. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest co-host today, you know him, he's Douglas Carlson. He's had partnerships at Lead Square. Douglas, welcome back.
Joe, thanks for having me. And I think once a triathlete, always a triathlete. But former is the right way to say it.
Is it to win the race or to finish the race as a triathlete?
It's really, it goes through sort of the waves. When you start out, it is just about getting across the finish line, and that's the hero moment. And as you do a few more of those, you start competing against yourself. Unless you're truly a pro, you're not gonna finish first. So you're really competing against your own time.
Yeah. So when you say the word triathlete or triathlon,
This is lunacy.
I can't understand how somebody would want to do that, but you know what, Douglas? To each their own. To each their own. Good for you, man. I bet that kept you in pretty good shape.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun. So I still try to get out for a couple of the sports from time to time.
It is important in higher education to take your moments too. We all have to have a way to get all that energy out, to keep ourselves healthy. And particularly as a college and university president, it's a tough job. And presidents today, they got to find an outlet. We're going to find out about our guest's outlet or outlets today when we talk to him. Let's get him on the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Dr. Angel Reyna. He is the president at Madera Community College. Madera, I got to say it with a rolling R, I think.
Yes, and you did that well, Joe. And thank you for having me on the show. Douglas as well. Pleasure to meet you both. Yes, so I'm actually approaching 5 years at Madera Community College as a president. May 20th, I'll be celebrating that anniversary. And I actually started, my community college experience in the state of Washington. So when I never imagined leaving the state of Washington in terms of career-wise, professional, personal. I've enjoyed my time in Washington State, but I'll tell you, when I came to California, I'm loving it here. There's just so much to do.
Surprise.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so much good food as well. Another surprise there, but it's beautiful. So I've been enjoying it. And more importantly, like what you mentioned, the great work that we do, but also the challenges, CEOs these days. So we did a survey in the state of California on community college presidents in terms of tenure. Do you want to take a guess of what that tenure duration is, longevity?
So is this in the state of California or nationwide?
State of California.
Douglas, I'm going to give you, as the guest co-host, I'm giving you first crack, and then I'm going to see if I like your answer to give a better one.
Oh, you're going to give Price is Right rules? I love
Yeah.
it. My guess, based upon kind of the context, is 7 years or less.
I'm going like 2.5 years.
Wow. So Joe, you're like spot on. It's 2.3.
Oh my goodness.
2.3. So yeah, you nailed it. I don't know. Did you read the
I had no idea, but I figured it was under 3 because it's getting to that. I've talked to so many presidents getting to that third year is it's a struggle to get to that third year. You've got to go through 2 years of tremendous change and trust building and so on. And many people don't make it through that first 2 years because of various reasons. So I figured it was probably between 2 and 3 years. So I just went halfway.
And so there's a lot of challenges to your point, right? You've interviewed a lot of other folks, so you have that knowledge and background. With social media, with COVID, and that's kind of where I entered. I had 10 months in when COVID hit, which to me, I felt like was a benefit because I actually got to see the faculty, staff, and students for 10 months versus some of the presidents that jumped in, never meeting, their interview committee, never meeting students in person for like at least a year, depending when they jumped in. I can't even imagine how challenging that would be to then when people started coming back, how you establish those relationships, because I'm very relational. So without having that, it's difficult to navigate because, as you mentioned, Joe, the trust piece is key.
Tell us a little bit about Madera. How many students? Where exactly are you located? Give us the 2-minute elevator.
Yeah, so we're located in the Central Valley of California, about 20 minutes north of Fresno, California. So when I arrived in May of 2019, we were a center. We hadn't become a college yet. We had,
oh, really?
Yeah, we were a center of our mother institution that became our sister college within our district. And at the time, we had 7,400 students. I was hired specifically to take it through accreditation. So I became the first campus president, the first ever college president. We became officially a college in July of 2020, which we know what was happening. COVID was still in the midst of that. But our enrollment, was counter to the narrative across the nation. Our enrollment continued to grow in terms of headcount. Yeah. And then we were pleasantly surprised. But we were doing a lot of intentional work in terms of community outreach. And so from that point, when I first started to now, of this academic year, we've grown by 3,000 students. So we're at about 10,400. So we just cracked 10,000 this year. And our FTS is 3,000. So as a new college, we're doing relatively well. But yeah, and so we're really excited. We're predominantly a Hispanic serving institution. 67% of our students are Hispanic, Latinx identified, with the second largest being white, Asian, then Black, African American, and then Native American, Indigenous folks. So yeah, we're pretty diverse, but predominantly Hispanic.
Amazing.
One more quick follow-up, and then Douglas, I'll pass it to you. I was reading a little bit about your story on Helen, and came over when you were 5 years old, came from, I think, Mexico when you were 5, and you worked, man. Like I saw your background. I was like, man, he was working as he grew up. I'm assuming first-gen college student. This must mean so much to you to be leading an institution, to go beyond the average, to be the first president of this institution. I mean, what a transformative experience you had through higher ed and in higher ed, when we're at a very funny time in higher ed, when a lot of people are shrugging their shoulders saying, I'm not doing it, or it's not worth it, or I don't see the value. Can you talk about your personal journey into and through higher ed and what your belief is about the value of higher ed?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. So yeah, I migrated to the U.S. You were close. At the age of 4, at that point, that's 20% of my life. So I'm just acknowledging that right at that point. But I'm the youngest of 7. And so we migrated to the United States and Washington State. As I mentioned, that's where I started. And I was 6 years old. I'm not big right now. And so I was a tiny little kid. And so my parents just had me moving the water around while they were working in the asparagus, and my older siblings were working. And I got bored because it was just me. And so for me, I was like, you know what? So there's this knife that you use in the asparagus. You hold it, and then you have to put a bucket and a belt. So they're like, it's too heavy for you, because as you start putting the asparagus in there, kind of like, it's too much. So they just said,
yikes.
Yeah, exactly. So I grabbed the knife and I just kept cutting. And then they just said, you know what, you're ready to go. They just didn't give me the bucket because I wouldn't be able to move. And I tell folks, if I would have known what I did to myself, I probably wouldn't have. I don't know, because I've never stopped working since, right? Since I was 6. But you know, boredom has been something that has pushed me to do great work because I just can't stand in the sidelines. I feel like I need to make a change and help others. But and as we, you know, got older and started attending school, and when the harvest would come around, especially around April, so around this time, when the asparagus would start, I remember we'd get up at 3:30 in the morning. We'd go to work. We would actually use our car to light up the asparagus field until the sun came out so we could get a head start on the day. No. Yeah, and it's around 7 in the morning. I'm trying to remember because, you know, as you get farther out, some of the details, you know, you forget, but it was around 7 a.m. or 7:30. Then we'd go to our car and we'd change. We wouldn't shower because there's no showers out in the field. So we'd change, catch the bus, go to school, go to the restrooms, wash our hands, and then, you know, spend the whole day in class. And so for me, and I tell other students when I engage with them and I share my story, it made me appreciate the value of education for a couple things. I knew that I didn't want to, you know, work out in the fields all my life. It's hard work. Much respect to all the people that can do it. It's very, very difficult work, and I did it up until the age of 18, until I went to Washington State University. But I tell them, you know, a couple things. I knew that education was a pathway out, and I always tell them, look, like, what are you doing right now physically as I'm talking to you? They're like, sitting down. Okay. Now, do you have to worry if it's raining or hot? No. I said, are you sitting next to your friends? Yes. And I go, what more do you want, right? So for me, when I was in the classroom, I was with my friends. I never worried about the weather, and I was resting, right? And I was socializing and enjoying my youth. But so I share, you know, there's a lot of pluses to education, and it's transformed my life. And so you know, I share the transformation, you know, Joe, as you asked me, from start to where I'm at. And I actually became an elected official as well in the town that I grew up in. I was a council member and then a mayor for 3.5 of the 4 years because I got a dean position, so I had to relocate. But that also shaped me in terms of my perspective. And at the time, I was also a director at a community college. So I was kind of a middle manager and a CEO at the same time. And I knew where I wanted to be, which was a CEO. So then I, you know, continued the path forward to being a college president, which am now.
I like your style, dude.
Go ahead, Douglas.
Well, and thank you. I know I'm really happy to have kind of heard the story from you specifically. It's one thing to read about it; it's another thing to actually have you tell it. So thank you for sharing that. I'm also curious to hear a little bit about this kind of the story of, and are you still is it you still hold the moniker of newest or the most recent community college in California, or is another opened?
No, it's correct. We're still the newest community college in the state of California, and we're the 116th.
Got it. Perfect. Yeah. Well, and I'm curious what, and I think I have a sense for the answer, but I'd love to hear it from you. Is where was the need to go from a center to a full community college? And I assume it was sort of demand from, you know, from where the location is. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of that journey and the need for
Yeah,
the journey.
yeah, that's a great question, Douglas. So, and this need and desire to move from a center to a college predated me. There had been conversations within the district. We're part of State Center Community College District, which 5 years before we became a college, Clovis Community College became the third. So if we go back 10 years, State Center Community College District only had 2 colleges, which was Fresno City and Reedley College. So then there was conversations that Madera would become the next community college, but with Clovis growing so much and probably politics, I wasn't there.
Sure.
They moved forward and advanced Clovis as the third college. And so when I arrived, and Madera County has no higher education institution in the whole county. And that was one of the reasons why the educational attainment at the time when I came in was ranked 55th out of 59 counties in California. So it was, you know, the whole Central Valley The educational attainment level is low. And so those were the driving forces to have a community college, a higher education institution in Madera County. And so when I arrived, the community was, I showed up and I said, hey, I'm going to work on this. We're going to take it to college status. And some of them would tell me straight up, they say, we've been hearing this for years.
Yeah.
And so when we were starting to move in that path, and I could see it happening because I started doing some of this work when I was in Washington State, when I knew I was coming down here, I zeroed in on the accreditation process, who I needed to talk to, et cetera. So I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I also, didn't want to promise something that was out of my control, right? Because there's third party, the accrediting body, and then the Board of Governors for the state of California also had to approve us.
Well, and can you tell me a little bit more about, we talked a little bit about the population you serve. Can you also talk a little bit about the job infrastructure that you're serving as well? Historically, at least what I'm familiar with, is like a very agricultural piece in the Central Valley, but that has certainly changed over the last even 5 or 10 years. So curious where you're serving there in the community.
Yeah, and it's still a lot of ag.
Yep.
Our campus is physically surrounded by ag, which I love. And I tell folks, for me, as I drive in, literally on the right side, orchards, on the left side is the campus. And I tell them, it's just like my life, right? I could see both sides of my life growing up in the fields and then where I'm at right now. But yes, ag is still dominant. Looking at issues around water issues, because the droughts that have happened over the years. The last 2 years we've actually had a healthy amount of rain, but it doesn't overcome like a decade worth of drought.
Sure.
Manufacturing as well is big. Logistics, with so many semi trucks up and down the 99, because we're right in the heart of California. And with ag, the Central Valley feeds the world. So we're moving commerce up and down the 99. And so we have a truck driving program that we established as soon as I came in. We were the first ones in our district to have that program. It's just bustling and, growing there, but also healthcare, because we all know, all of us have health needs. And so what happened about, I want to say 15 months ago or so, and you may or may not be aware, our Madera Community Hospital shut down.
Oh.
Because they couldn't make their payroll because of their reimbursements. And then the traveling nurses, because of COVID, they were making so much money that they just couldn't afford to operate. And so that impacted our nursing program, because our students lost their clinical site, and we lost our adjunct faculty, because they were full-time employees at Madera Community Hospital. And when that happened, they said, hey, I got to go look for a full-time job. I can't focus on this. But so there's some challenges, but there's also a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to grow our healthcare programs on our campus.
Well, and very clearly from our conversation, already growing the campus to 10,000 enrollments, 3,000 over the last few years. You're doing something right. Obviously, there's the demand for education. Can you tell us a little bit about that growth and that journey? Because it's an interesting, kind of zoom out and take the nationwide trend, is like the last few years, the community college systems have had trouble enrolling and trouble graduating. And it seems like, that's not the case at Madera.
Yeah. And so there's a couple reasons for that. One of the things, for me, and I'll just share my lived experience, I didn't see another person that looked like me that was a teacher or in a position of authority until I was getting my master's. And that validated me being there, because I honestly felt like I didn't belong in education. And I do believe that me looking like and having a shared lived experience with our students has made a difference, because I connect with the community, both at the political level with the city council and the board supervisors, but also with the K-12 partners. And that same lived perspective, I have a general understanding of, what do we need to help our students feel more comfortable and welcome on our campus.
Nailed it.
And so we make decisions based on some of those things that our first generation students might not understand about higher education. And we started going to the community. So we started going to flea markets because we knew that's where the community was. It's like, why have them come to us and feel unwelcome and not comfortable, let's go to them and where they were at. And that was very successful for us. We also started doing some sessions in Spanish with parents, because the parents in the Hispanic Latinx community are very important towards pushing their children to education and the trust and having that knowledge. So we started doing some of that with financial aid, et cetera, and just having, you know, them welcome. And then we worked with this program that's a migrant education program. They came and met me as soon as I arrived, and they said, hey, this is the student population we serve, and 90% of them go to your college.
Oh, wow.
And I asked them, well, do we do anything with you all? Do we have, like, you know, a weekend thing or make the students feel welcome? Like, no, well, let's do it. So we did that probably a few months after I arrived. We had 200 students show up, and then COVID hit, so we paused that for a while. And we restarted it last year again, and we had a great turnout. But it's a lot of those intentional partnerships that helped us tremendously. And I don't know if you both are aware, but we won the Lumina $1 Million Challenge.
Tell them like it is.
And the focal point of that, and this was a national competition. We beat out schools from all over the nation. And the focal point was the sense of belonging, but we call it in Spanish, pertenezco, the sense of belonging. And we're infusing those components within the campus. And I can share some of those pieces that we're doing when you want me to.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. For a third straight year, the EdUp Experience will be recording live at Ellucian Live 2024 this year in San Antonio, Texas, April 7th through the 10th. Illuminate, innovate, and inspire. That's the framework for the conference. Leaders from institutions around the world will converge at Ellucian Live 2024 to discover game-changing technology, share industry insights, and build powerful connections. It's time to explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. You can register now at elive.ellucian.com.
Yeah.
You should talk about that, because I interviewed, if I get their names, I'll have to look them up, but I interviewed the representatives from the foundation as the contest was happening and when they announced the winner. I can't, I'll have to go back and get their names.
Was it Shauna and Mary?
Absolutely was. Yep. Shauna and Mary. Yep. And they came on to talk about the contest itself, and then came on to announce the winner, you. And now I'm putting all the dots together. That this was a big deal, that $1 million challenge. Can you talk about how transformational that's been to Madera?
Yeah, and you know, when we became a finalist, I think 2 years ago in April, when we were a top 10 finalist, they guarantee the top 10 finalists $100,000. The winner gets $1 million. For us, when they interviewed us in that second round, I remember Mary and Shauna were in the room, and some of our folks, and I told them straight up, I told them, look, we're going to do this work regardless if we win or not. You're just going to accelerate it. And I was just very straightforward, because we didn't want to not be who we are with them.
Tell them like it is.
We're going to do it. And so when we were awarded the $1 million, we were already trying to develop the sense of belonging. But one of them was murals on our campus that reflected our students, and just to add more life to the campus, so it just felt more welcoming. The other was to transform a space, because we have a new facility now that just opened up in the fall, to develop a multicultural center where students felt welcomed and they could come, and also develop a veterans center, because we didn't have a center for our veterans, and we really want to serve them better. And the other thing was to have open houses. So we've had 2 open houses where on a weekend we open up and we have our community come out, free food. Our faculty and staff highlight their programs. So it's almost like saying, hey, our door's open, come and visit us and come and see what we're doing. And then the third and more important piece is our branding, and we're still working on that. You know, what feel do you get from the college when you hear Madera Community College? And those are some of the things that we're still working through as well. But we're really excited on finalizing this, because the murals just started about a week ago and they're coming fast and they're just looking, and everybody's like super excited. You have, faculty and staff, they're like, wow, this is so beautiful and it's going to transform the campus. So we're excited.
That's incredible. And I think the thing that resonates with me most about that is it'll be unique to every school, but it kind of sounds like your playbook could be taught elsewhere as well. So I'd be curious on your thoughts on if another community college is struggling to kind of figure out who they are, maybe address their population, or maybe running into similar headwinds that you had. What would you kind of take from your playbook, or what advice would you give to them?
I think getting to know the community you serve is paramount.
Yeah,
And I know when we come in as CEOs, we're like, there's so many things you have to manage and navigate. And that's why, I was very intentional, and I'll take a step back. I was very intentional to select Madera Community College where I wanted to be a president, because I wanted to be somewhere where I could represent and reflect the students that I serve, for a couple reasons. Because, I never had that growing up and I saw the importance when I did. But it also, that shared lived experience also helps inform the decisions that I make, and the connection to the community was easier. I'm not saying it's easy, but it was easier
sure.
because I could relate. And having a team around you that buys into a student-centered approach, right? It's not about me. It's not about my career. It is indirectly, if you do the work well, your career will take off, right? Versus I'm just going to focus on me, professional development, what can I do? And all those things are important. But the other ingredient here, to where I asked Joe, what's the longevity of a CEO, right? You can't do much if you're already looking to get out or being pushed out when you haven't even completed 2 years or about to complete 2 years, right?
It's fuzzy math.
You're just now in survival mode versus on transformation mode. And so I think that's another key piece is having CEOs, whether it's, you're committed to the institution. And I learned this when I became an Aspen Fellow for the new presidents, that the ones that had the most transformation in their career stayed 7 years plus,
Sure.
right? And I remember a president that I worked for in Washington State. He had served for 30 years as president, and he told me, he said, Angel, how many years it takes for you to create transformation at a college? At least 7 years. And I'm seeing that, right? Because I'm completing 5 years and I'm starting to see some of the groundwork and the framework where you institutionalize things. And so when I interviewed this, how long are you going to stay here? And I said, I'll look at least 7 years, see how things go. And there's been opportunities here and there. But what I will tell you is that, with California, 116 colleges, there's, churn, and there's opportunities elsewhere. And you can't blame somebody to go from a president to a chancellor or get a,
Sure.
but that is also an issue that slows down the work of, better serving your community. Because when you transition, then the community has to get to know the new person, et cetera, et cetera. So there's several factors within that, but it's commitment to community and students, I think, are the key ingredients.
Do you think, Angel, that talk about those ingredients? Can you talk about the people ingredient a bit? Because many of the presidents that I speak to, especially in that first couple of years, are experiencing pushback from faculty. They've had, I talked to a president recently who said he survived 2 assassination attempts in his 11-year tenure. And he goes, I don't mean anybody tried to kill me, but they tried to kill me professionally. You have faculty, you have administrators, you have student stakeholders. Is there a cycle where maybe people, you've presented this vision, you're moving forward, you got to get people on, and some people just aren't going to be on with that vision. So they've got to self-select out in order for you to hit that supercharged time. Can you talk, I'm making this up, I'm just saying, I'm inferring that, but can you talk about the people part of that too and achieving what you want to achieve?
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to, how you started this off with the CEO and the wellness aspect of it. Because, people say some really nasty things, and
outrageous.
Believe it or not, presidents are human too. And, we feel some of those daggers, right? And over time, you get numb to some of them, but not all of them, because you're still human, right? And so one of the things, and I think as, I've matured as a president, and I'm not making this up. I remember one day I was just in my office and I was just reflecting, and I was like, this is kind of challenging, but it's also an opportunity. And then I just took a deep breath and I told myself, don't take it personal. And it helped me just saying that to myself. Don't take it personal, right? But it's hard not to when you're the face of the organization and you're on 24/7. There's the challenge of how do you separate the personal from a professional setting when you're the face of an institution. But I will say that, having good relationships with faculty is very important. Having great relationships with our classified professionals is very important. And for me, what I do, there's a hierarchy, whether you like it or not, in organizations. And community colleges are no different, where, you have kind of instructional faculty, the perception of folks, right? Instructional faculty, counseling faculty, then classified, right? And though that's kind of the tier, and what I've always tried to do is try to treat them equitably as much as possible, whether some people like it or not. I think it's important to say every role in the institution is important, because if we don't have our building services folks on our campus, nobody's ever going to turn on the light for us to have class. And
that's a fact. That's a fact.
And if the classroom isn't clean and you're a student, you're like, hey, this is gross. Why am I going to want to come to this campus, right? And so a lot of those things matter. And I've been very intentional to work with our folks to say, you've ever been to a restaurant where you go in and it looks good while you're trying to eat, but you go to the restroom and it's trash? You get that feeling of like, I'm not going to come back. And that's what I tell folks is like, imagine the campus as that restaurant, the restroom in the restaurant. If it looks nice, has a good feel, people are going to want to come back. People are going to say, this is a legit organization and community college that values me, because they're giving me the things that I need. And it's been successful because they buy into it. And I also, leading by example on the people aspect is very important. I would never ask somebody to do something I wouldn't do, and they know that. And I also try to provide balance with folks to say, I'm not going to be messaging you late on the weekdays, and on the weekends, I enjoy your family, because this is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
That matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, Douglas, back to you, and then ask whatever you have, and then we'll close on hell out. But if I go to a restaurant, my wife and I go to a restaurant, and it's clean, and she goes in the bathroom and it's not clean, the first thing she'll say when she comes out, and I would do the same, is if their kitchen is even half as nasty as their bathroom, we do not want to eat here. So it's behind, you immediately infer the worst because of a lack of attention. I think you're so right. That's such a good analogy. Douglas.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that is so spot on, and it kind of in the same sports theme. It reminds me of the Lou Holtz quote as well, kind of going back to you as the face of the organization. It's like, you're never as good as everyone tells you are when you win, and you're never as bad as they say you are when you lose. Like I love that quote, because it's just you
Nailed
never, you get it, you kind of get it on both sides, but it's also nice to like get the accolades too. And I'll let ultimately Joe finish all this off, but I'm curious for thinking about the community college system, and especially the community college system in California. Is what do you think is the biggest opportunity for the system, and what are the things that are stumbling blocks? And that may be specific to your college or maybe specific to the system, but I'd just be curious, kind of uniquely. We always talk about sort of higher education, but community college is such an important, unique aspect of it. I'd love to hear kind of like your take on that.
Yeah, and I think some folks may be questioning the legitimacy of community colleges in terms of what's the return on investment, right? Especially if they don't do their research. They're going to say, well, why am I going to go here? I'm getting $20 at Taco Bell or Burger King, when that was rising. But that's a job, not a career, right? At some point, you're going to get tired of it. You're going to leave, and it doesn't provide the medical benefits that you and your family might need, et cetera. And community colleges will provide you that pathway at a very low cost. And at California community colleges, we're one of the cheapest in the nation. We're still at $46 a unit. There's a lot of financial aid, whether it's federal or state. So we provide a tremendous opportunity in terms of access and support for students because we're local as well. And I will say some of the challenges are that the way we're structured doesn't allow us to pivot as fast as technology is shifting, specifically with AI.
Yeah.
And imagine a system, with 116 colleges. Some can move, faster than others. But when the state of California is, in general, this is my perspective coming from Washington to California, is far more regulated. And so there's a lot of I's you need to dot, a lot of T's you need to cross excessively, that to move and adjust is challenging. And especially with AI, how are we going to adjust to that? Whether it's grading our students, whether it's the use of it on campus. I've been tinkering a little bit with some messages, and it comes out with some good stuff that I would have probably wrote anyways, but just like this. And then I go in there, and then, you personalize it to your voice. And what does that do for us? Does it make me more efficient? Now, can I focus on some other things, et cetera? And I just think some of the challenges too are, the mental health of our students. COVID really did have an impact on our students' mental health, whether they were used to not being around other students and then came out of it, and then social media, the amount of pressure that goes in. We grew up with fast food issues. When I would go to McDonald's, I'm like, why is my food not here? And then you go to a restaurant and you're always kind of wanting to go fast. But now imagine that accelerated at a very young age for kids to be liked on social media, and the expectation to be liked, the expectation to have followers. I can't even imagine that and what it does to mental health if you don't have that, or whatever status that's evolving. And so we have that happening with our students, is that they come in with a lot of mental health challenges, and we need to develop a better infrastructure in community colleges or in our communities to support the needs of our students.
You're right. It can be like a drug, social media. You want more of it when you have it, and when you don't have the attention, you want more of it. It's really dangerous, particularly as you put phones in the hands of young kids who are become adults. It's really hard to pull attention back on things that are more important, which is a huge issue for community college presidents like yourself, Angel. And we want to close this episode, give you an open mic. Tell us anything else you want to say about Madera and what you see for the future of higher education.
Yeah, and for us, we have an opportunity to continue to build out our programming to fit the needs of our students. And we've started athletics. We started our women's soccer team this past fall, our first ever athletic team. They did us proud. They did really well. So excited to grow that. We're moving into cross country as well, men's and women's, in the fall. And it's just added another life and energy to our campus. So, for us to see it from a center, not having any athletics, to now seeing some athletes on our campus, it has changed the atmosphere. I remember one day during the summer, I was walking by, and then all of a sudden I'm hearing, some girls kicking the ball around. And I'm like, hey, what's going on over there? And I'm like, it was different. And I went out there and said hello to them. It's just beautiful to see how our campus has transformed for the betterment for our students, and more importantly for the broader community that we serve. We're also working on a Wi-Fi parking lot project. So if students, don't have a quiet space at home during the weekends, or just want to come and do some work in their car or just relax, they're going to have the opportunity to do that. We're hoping to get that done by fall semester, just to have different spaces, because we're becoming predominantly online.
Yeah.
Our students are preferring that for convenience, not necessarily for preference, right? If they have kids, they have jobs, now they could, or they don't have a car, they don't have to worry about that. They can access us in different ways. But I do also think, the future, as I talked a little bit, is how are we going to continue to sell our value proposition to individuals as we move forward? And how are we going to adjust to that demand that AI is kind of imposing on us? How are we going to pivot? How are we going to adjust? Because in 5 years, technology is moving at an exponential pace. Can we keep up with it? I think that's something that we need to grapple with, not only in the state of California, but I think in the nation for community colleges and probably universities as well. What does the world of work look like in 5 to 10 years?
What do you think, Douglas? Good conversation.
Oh, this is fantastic. I'm really excited to have been a part of the conversation and sincerely appreciate the time.
No,
He's Douglas Carlson. He is the head of partnerships at Lead Squared. Douglas, we hope you have a good weekend because we're doing this on a Friday. We'll all go get some mental health, maybe a few video games in my case, PS5 for anybody. I mean, nerd out. Probably take my wife to dinner to even things out, by the way. And ladies and gentlemen, our guest, he's your guest. He is Dr. Angel Reyna. He is the president of Madera Community College. Angel, it has been an honor to have you on the podcast, and we're glad that we figured things out and made it happen.
Yeah, and it's been my pleasure, Joe and Douglas, pleasure to meet you both. And thank you for the great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
Jason.
It's time to register for Elucian Live 2024, April 7th through 10th in San Antonio, Texas. Illuminate, innovate, inspire, explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. Register now at elive.elucian.com. This conference is going to be epic.